In the first few rounds of the Biel Grandmasters tournament, we've seen that the Chinese player Liren is an excellent tactician. Today, he proved that he's a great strategist as well. Let's take a look at his game from today against Alexander Moiseenko, the Chinese player with the white pieces. And it's a Queen's Gambit declined played by Moiseenko, very solid indeed, true to his style. And Liren has played the currently rather popular Bishop f4 variation, and here, well, the most popular move is Knight d7, as Moiseenko played today. It's only fashion. c5 is the old main line and a very decent alternative, but okay, Knight d7 is the fashionable move, and the idea is for black to take on c4, then to hit out with c5, and then perhaps play a6 and b5 as well. And that's why white closes the position with c5 and gets this big space advantage on the queen side. Now, the most popular way for black to play is to play on the queen side here and exchange off this bad bishop, but you can see that because of this bishop on f4, controlling this really important diagonal, white is always a bit better here. So Moiseenko tried something different. He played knight to e4. Well, it's been seen before, and in fact, Liren had a game in exactly this position last year, where he also played rook c1. But you can see that the play is in the centre and on the king side. In this game I mentioned that Liren played last year against Wesley So, the game that went like this, and Liren was slightly better. Today Alexander Moiseenko played f5, so the character of the game has changed again. So with the pawns here, this is just like a Dutch position, a stonewall Dutch. So it makes a very solid impression, supporting this knight in the middle of the board. But, of course, it does weaken the e5 square. Let's see, h3, that's important. So if g5, the bishop can safely drop back to h2. And, well, Liren demonstrated a very interesting variation after the game. He said that if b6, he'd prepared this, probably for his game against So, or perhaps after. And it looks slightly strange to play like this for white, but actually this should be good because white targets the c6 pawn. It won't be possible to hold that pawn. And in this kind of position, so black wins this pawn back, white wins the pawn back. Black is going to regret playing this pawn to f5 because the e6 pawn is weak. The king is also weak because the f-pawn has advanced. So you have to be very careful when you play a move like f5. Looks great here, but if things go wrong, you can really suffer. Bishop f6 played, just controlling that e5 square. Now let's get to this position. This is a very important position in the game because black has to choose his middle game plan. You might perhaps want to break in the middle with e5, but there are tactical problems here. You can take, and maybe taking with the bishop is best, and then you play knight takes d5, and the point of course is that if pawn takes, you win your piece back, it's check, and then you capture the bishop on e5. Alternatively, it's very tempting to strike out on the king side with g5. But this can be very risky indeed. It's not easy to break through. So okay, let me make a random move like b4. Okay, queen g6. Well, let me exchange this off. If d takes e4, then the knight can come around here and maybe through to d6. And you can see that black's pawns are held up here. That the queen and bishop do a very good job. Or if f takes e4, then again knight d2. And well, these bishops look rather dangerous to me, actually, and it's really not easy for black to break through on the king side. Okay, let's go back. So instead Moiseenko played b6 and Ding took on e4 and the knight came in. And here Moiseenko took with the bishop and they reached this position. And then bishop d7 and queen d4. Now, let me go back a few moves, and if you just remember that position. Ding said after the game that it would have been better to play knight takes and then not to exchange on e5 but wait with d7, and you can see here that white is unable to play the queen to d4 because black obviously hasn't exchanged on e5 yet, and in that way black actually gains time. And the problem is that, well, yeah, it's not so easy for white to do something here. Well, if you play a move like rook c3, for example, maybe looking to turn to the queen side, then that e-pawn can actually come under fire. So, white can still play, maybe f4 here or something, but certainly black has gained a move there compared to the game. Well, let's go back to that game continuation, and you can see what a difference this makes. So the queen comes to d4, and here there's already pressure on b6, and well, black has a fundamental choice here. Do you keep the queen side open with a move like queen b8? In that case, white could strike out on the king side, or do you play b5 and close the position? Well, Moiseenko closed it with b5, but it's very hard to say which was stronger. As it is, maybe it was better to keep the queen side open. It's hard to say. Here, Ding thought that perhaps black should play queen e7 and then bring the bishop round to g6, or attempt to, and then he'd have to play queen g4. Instead, Moiseenko struck out with the queen, but I think it was very impressive the way that Ding dealt with this, it's kind of pseudo activity by the black queen. Now he starts to take control. I think black's problem is that here he doesn't have a very clear plan, whereas white's plan, basically to edge forward on the king side, is very, very clear, and actually that queen just gets in the way on h6. It doesn't really hold up white's play. So black is just waiting here, and white can just build up very, very slowly. Let me just go back a couple of moves. I mean, it's very hard to know when to wait with black and when to make a pawn move, or where to position your pieces. The queen obviously can't do much. The rook has to hang around the queen side because suddenly you might be hit by queen c3 and queen to a5. If, for example, rook f8, let's see what happens if black waits. Well, then a4, and now bishop d3, and in this position, again the black rook has to wait here, otherwise queen d3 can happen. But having exchanged that bishop, then, it's possible to triple on the g file. I mean, you can always play your king over here to safety, and maybe break with e4 or break with f5. Basically, white can decide when and how to break, and it's not easy to defend that position. Right, let's have a little look. Oh, the other thing is, of course, what happens if black plays with a4. Would that give black more security? Well, no, you have to be careful, because white might well move the king round to b4, and after trading pieces, that king could come into the queen side. So it's very difficult to know how to defend with black. Okay, bishop e4 played, but Moiseenko, running short of time, didn't get it right. Bishop at g4, and now basically black is cracking. It's maybe an option to try and give up the exchange here, and perhaps get some kind of fortress. In fact, white can switch to the h file very, very easily. For example, here, and you can bring the queen over to h1, and there could be, you could take and maybe sacrifice the exchange on g6 or f5, and then you're always going to break through. Let's go back. So in this position, black is struggling, and Moiseenko cracked. After this, the Chinese player was able to take a pawn, and even better, get the pawn to h6, and now this one is a target. And his technique was very good. Okay, here, white wants to play e6, of course, to get the queen into h8 and then maybe to h7. But the rook is on prise, so first of all, that has to be defended. And this is the right way to do it, because the king finds more security over on this side of the board. Okay, the queen comes back to c7. Again, the rook is undefended, however, in this case it can just move. And, well, as well as e6, of course, rook f1 is also coming. Moiseenko played queen b8, but e6 is a winning move. In this position, he resigned, because if queen h2, then black is going to be checkmated. There we are. And apart from that, well, yeah, the queen enters the position and takes here, and it's going to be mate, and it's all over. Excellent game from Liren, and if we look at the scores after 6 rounds, we can see that he's now in second place in the tournament. In Biel, they're using the system of 3 points for a win, 1 for a draw. So at the moment, Bacro has 10 points after 6 rounds. Liren has 9 points. Moiseenko and Biel Grandmasters have 7 points, and Nishi and Rapport at the bottom of the tournament so far. Tomorrow in Biel, it's the rest day, but the battles, the fights resume on Monday with round 7. So do join me then.